Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania is part of a bipartisan group looking to make some significant cuts in the size of the stimulus package. He met with the president yesterday and has been meeting with Senators Collins and Nelson as well. He joins us tonight from Capitol Hill. Senator Specter, welcome. Have some of the things that you and your bipartisan group have been suggesting going to make it into the final package?
Well, it depends upon whether we can go far enough to satisfy a small group of Republicans. I would like to see this a bipartisan bill. I think it was it could have been much better for the country had there not been a straight party line vote in the House. And we're working. We've been meeting virtually round the clock, several meetings today, and it's still going on to try to refine it to be satisfactory. And if we can come to terms, I think it will be part of the final legislation.
Today, the president said the time for action is now, but some of your Republican colleagues took to the floor today to plead for a slowing down, a review, a rewrite of the bill. Where do you find yourself tonight?
Well, I discussed that with the president and raised the issue that we're not following regular order. And when we don't go through the hearing process, the analysis, the markup, we make mistakes. We passed the TARP bill, $700 billion, without having a chance to study it. It was a rushed matter, and we made a lot of mistakes. There were provisions there that no one really understood. Now we're dealing here with $800 billion plus, and I think that we could take a little more time. The president says we have a very severe emergency. I recognize that. This is not my preference, but we're trying to be cooperative. Listen, we want President Obama to succeed, and we want to deal with this economic crisis. And we're aware of the high unemployment rate and the thousands of people who are losing their jobs every day. But we have a responsibility under the Constitution for separation of powers to take an independent look, and we're doing our very best to do that.
We just heard from the director of the Office of Management and Budget, Mr. Orszag, who told my colleague Jeff Brown that they've been wrestling all along with the balance between tax cuts that get into people's hands right away but sometimes aren't very stimulative versus spending that rolls out over a longer period of time, but you get a good bang for the buck. Are you close, in the package that's being presented by the bipartisan group, are you close to striking a balance that you can support?
Well, I think we'd be better off with more tax cuts. They are more immediate. And there are many items in this stimulus package which do not go to stimulate the economy. I think, and I've been on the Appropriations Committee for all of my 28 years, a lot of these items ought to be taken up in regular order in appropriations. And we ought to be directing the stimulus package to things that will stimulate the economy now. When we are burdening the taxpayers with this tremendous additional burden, we ought to be very, very sharply focused. We ought to have a lot more in that on highways and bridges and mass transit, high-speed rail. We ought to be looking to energy items, but there's a great deal of this bill on items I have long supported, but they ought to be in the regular appropriations process.
Well, just so I understand you, the current price tag of the package that's being offered by the majority is something in the range of $920 billion. Senator Collins, your colleague from Maine, talked about a package that she'd accept that was more like $800 billion. If you were going to strip out that kind of money, would it come out of the spending for capital projects and investments in various kinds of local spending, or would it come out of the tax cuts to get that price tag down?
The focus of what we've been doing in these bipartisan talks has been on the appropriations process. It has been on the line where monies are being spent. We're trying to emphasize highways, bridges, mass transit, and some of the other programs, and also the safety net. Some of the other programs could be deferred until the appropriations bill comes up, which is going to be very, very shortly.
Has the president been too optimistic, in your view, on the number of jobs that could be created by a package?
No, I don't believe he's been too optimistic. I'm prepared to accept his figures. I think the reality is that nobody knows with any relative degree of certainty. We pick a figure and it doesn't have any scientific basis. I wouldn't say that it's picked out of the air, but that's pretty close. And when you start to estimate the number of jobs, it reminds me of Police Commissioner Rizzo in Philadelphia years ago estimating crowd size. It's pretty speculative.
As we get to this point in the process, when you talk to your fellow senators, is it just a question of a big existential objection to this kind of thing? Or are there people who are saying, if only this wasn't in it, then I could come around? Or if I could get this part of it smaller or larger, for that matter, then I could come around?
We don't have existential objections. We have very concrete, specific objections. We object to spending more than we have to for a purpose which is not really crystallized and defined. Our objections really go to recognizing the need for a stimulus and wanting these expenditures to be targeted, rifle shot to a stimulus, and not to look to long-term effects where we have a regular budget to do that, where we establish targets, we establish amounts of money, and we then consider priorities. That's really the core of our financial fiscal concerns.
And do you think there'll be a vote tonight?
No. On the final passage, no. We're right in the middle of roll call votes. A dozen amendments are being considered, and there are many more to be considered. On the efforts that Senator Collins and Senator Nelson and the rest of us are working on, we have to write it down. It's going to take a little time. Doesn't necessarily have to take a whole lot of time, and we're prepared to move ahead promptly, but we cannot do it instantaneously. That is not physically possible, let alone whether it's the best thing to do.
Majority Leader Reid said in an off-camera briefing earlier today that he thinks he has the votes to get this thing passed, and with a few Republicans.
Well, I don't know where they are coming from. I think that he could have the votes. There could be a respectable number if we were able to work this out, but I don't want to disagree with the Majority Leader. He can count.
So you haven't spoken to any of your colleagues that you could identify now as an aye vote on this?
Well, I'm not going to talk about conversations I have with my colleagues. Suffice it to say that I do not see 60 votes in hand, but I see the prospect of doing that if we can have just a little more flexibility.
Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania, thanks for joining us, sir.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.